Welcome to the Four Visions Market Podcast, a space built on the principles of integrity and reciprocity. Together, we will engage in thought-provoking conversations about plant medicines, why these plants are coming out of the rainforest, jungles, and mountains after thousands of years, and what it means to be in right relationship with the ancestral wisdom cultures and guardians of these traditions. I'm your host, Mariah Gannessa, founder and director of Four Visions Market. This podcast is the natural evolution in our commitment to providing you, our tribe, with incredible resources to support you on your healing journey through plant medicines. Welcome home. Welcome back, Four Visions tribe. We're back with another amazing episode for you this week with a dear friend of mine, Eli Rechtschaffen. Eli is a man full of so much joy and love and has a tremendous amount of wisdom to share with the world. Eli is a dedicated student of life and has been on the healing path since a young age. His personal healing journey has been informed by grief through the loss of his older brother, as well as a quest for physical healing, which ignited the fire within him to go out and search for the tools he needed to heal himself. His search led him to the Amazon jungle to study with the Taitas of the Ingano and Siona tribes of Colombia. He found healing, reconciliation, and peace through his work with the ancestral plants. For the last decade, he has been supporting these tribes to share their healing work with the world. This is episode 2 in a 3-week series on the culture of Yagé. We dive deep into a powerful conversation about how to live life with more grace, beauty, and presence. We discuss the concepts of strengthening our spiritual fibers, staying calm in the midst of challenging circumstances, living a life full of color, and other beautiful lessons we've received from the Taitas over the last decade. This episode was so fun for us to record, and I hope you enjoy tuning in and getting to sit in on this beautiful conversation.
A quick word from our sponsors before we begin this episode.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Suma Kausai Music Festival in partnership with Four Visions Market and Finca Ambiwasi. We welcome you to join us in Colombia at Finca May 30th through June 2nd, 2023 for 4 days of epic music, celebration, teachings from wisdom keepers, plant medicine, and community building. Suma Kausai is an Ingano term meaning the good life, and this festival will truly embrace the joy and sweetness that this good life has to offer us. Headlining, we have some incredible world-renowned musicians, including Pia, Ajit, and Grupo Putumayo. Our lineup is full of beautiful medicine musicians from the Finca Ambiwasi family, as well as Colombian musicians, and some more surprise guests. Learn more about the event by going to tinyurl.com/Suma Kausai Festival. That's Suma, S-U-M-A, Kausai, C-A-U-S-A-Y Festival. This is an all-inclusive event that includes pickup and drop-off at Bogota Airport, all food and accommodations, and all the incredible concerts, workshops, and offerings during our 4 days together. Due to the size of our center, the festival is limited to 50 participants, and we're filling up quickly. If you feel the call to join us this spring, don't wait. Sign up today to reserve your spot at this super special healing event. Welcome, Eli. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to drop in my brother and to get to have this incredible conversation. It's something I've been looking forward to all week. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Mariah. So good to be here.
So, this is part of a multiple-part series on the culture of Yagé, and you and I have been walking this path together for many years now, and I'm looking forward to diving into this ancestral healing culture and the therapy that we have been deeply immersed in together, and getting to share a little bit with our listeners about this sacred plant and the culture and all the wisdom that it has given to us over our own spiritual journeys. And with that, I would love to start with asking you to share a little bit about what brought you to the path of Yagé and what started you on your healing journey.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate in my life. My parents have always been into spirituality. My mother spent time with Osho in India, and she traveled around the world doing yoga. She was a massage therapist and just really in this quest of self-discovery. And as well, my dad has been into meditation for a long time. He also, in the beginning, was more in working with Sufism. And so from a Sufi community he worked with, and there was a particular teacher named Pir Vilayat Khan. And Pir Vilayat said to my dad when he was younger, I think maybe early 20s, that my dad should build the Omega Institute. And so that was a big organization, a beautiful retreat center in upstate New York. And so when I was there as a young kid, I spent a lot of time there and had the opportunity to be around teachers like Ram Dass and Krishna Das and a lot of the big known spiritual teachers in the West. And so I feel like from my birth, and I think working with the Yagé as well, seeing sort of behind my birth, there was a sort of an energy of spirituality that came through. But, maybe some kids embrace that, but there was definitely sort of a pushing away for me. Like I felt like I was interested, but still was like keeping my distance. And I think we were going to talk about this a little bit more later as well, but some big shifts, some big impacts happened in my life when I was around 19, 20 years old. One of those big impacts was the death of my brother. And that was a time when I was right in the middle of university. I was studying in Norway, and my brother passed away. And that sort of was sort of the kick out of the door of like, okay, life is good, things are going well, but there's something more for you to look at. And I've sometimes seen that as like that moment, and my brother in particular was sort of like a fallen angel, like something that. And I remember Taita explaining to me this once. There was a bird after a ceremony that had hit into a window. Actually, you were there. This happened between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember we were at a ceremony and we were singing in the morning, and then all of a sudden we're in the middle of playing and this bird comes and hits into the window, and the bird is suffering, and we go and we did some prayers and rituals, and at the end of those prayers and rituals we saw the bird die, and it was like in that moment. And it was interesting what Taita Juanito said in that moment was, well, not in that moment, but later when I asked him, was that it's like a sacrifice that gets made, sort of like a spiritual payment that nature is making for some sort of liberation, some sort of opening. And so I feel like that was something that happened with my brother. It was sort of the way the life was moving, and that was really the moment where my path opened to look at what is spirituality and what am I doing here.
So beautiful. Death is such a big wake-up call. And it literally knocks on our door and says, open your eyes, value life, and
Yeah.
and I think it's beautiful the way that your brother's passing marked this very crucial point in your journey, to take your life seriously, to not waste any of it. And
Yeah.
And he served as a catalyst for your spiritual evolution and accompanies you, and it's so beautiful the way that his presence has informed your studies, has informed your service. You really feel, just being your friend, being your companion on this path. I know personally that your brother has been with you and is an angel for you and a guardian for you. So it's beautiful to hear you speak about it. And yeah, thanks for sharing. I think a lot of us have experienced that in some form or another, of losing someone or having this call to action come in the form of death. And that's kind of the way that death is a teacher with life. And I'm curious to ask you a little bit more, since we're here on this topic already. I would love to dive deeper into this theme of grief and
Mm.
healing. And if you could share a little deeper to begin, how you carried yourself through the grieving process and how it became a teacher for you.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think sort of like if we zoom out a little bit, I think everyone has what I think are sort of these like karmic wins or like alignments of the stars or grace moving into our lives. And now I think grace is always around us, and in the same moment there's a sort of like sensitivity that we need to have to grace,
Mm.
like we need to be open in a sort of way to receive it, you know. And so for me, my brother's passing, I remember at that time that it happened, and I think something really interesting for each of us to look at is how different we all are. And so why I say that is because I remember the grieving process of mine and the grieving process of my mother and my sister, because Daniel, my brother who passed away, is the son of my mom. Yeah, so it was a half brother. I remember our grieving processes were very different. Um, and of course, you want to be in union and be able to hold each other and to be able to support each other. But sometimes it's hard because you grieve in different ways. And my way of grieving was kind of closing down in that time because it was too much for me to emotionally experience. And I was lucky that in my emotional sort of closure, I was able to say, okay, I'm closing, but I need to go and do something to move the energy. And what I did was I went to India. And I went to India for like 4 or 5 months, and then I continued traveling through Asia. And so, although it wasn't something that was there and I was thinking about so much and like emotionally going through, I think I was processing it through my practices. And then, sort of over time, I was able to like have moments where the stars just aligned and I was ready to grieve in that way. I mean, I can share with my mom, maybe a year and a half ago, we had come out of a ceremony with Taita, and this is really one of the more beautiful moments I've had recently. And so we're in the morning of the ceremony, we're sitting outside, we're in a cold plunge, and we're both like enjoying the cold. And there's some people, and the people are coming, and then they leave, and all of a sudden, it's just us in this spa. And just the two of us are sitting there. My mom starts to talk. Just had come out of the ceremony, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And my mom starts to share this amazing dream she had. She's a someone that has very profound dreams. And so the dream was of she's standing in her dream and she's looking downwards. And she's looking down and there's 4 feet and they all have trench coats on. But she can't look up. She can just see down, but she knows because of the size of the shoes and because of the trench coats that it's men. And so in that moment in her dream, she realized it's my brother Daniel, it's her brother who passed away, it's her dad, and it's also one of her best friends. Uh, and then in the dream, someone reaches out for her hand and he kisses her hand. And as he kisses her, she looks up and it's my brother. And so in that moment, like I can even feel it right now, I just like exploded, I
Mm-hmm.
exploded into tears and grief and she like came over and we hugged each other and it was really so emotional. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it. and it was so moving to be able to be in such a vulnerable state and sharing with each other. And it was so important for us because she had sort of grieved in such a strong way, and I had grieved in my own way, but the universe and life had aligned for us to then come together in that moment and grieve together. And she was like, I don't think I've seen you cry like that about Daniel since his death. And so I think it's something really, really important, is that the grieving process is so individual and we all go through it in our own unique way. And I think the important thing is not so much what it looks like, but more of what are the things that you're doing in your life to keep you in a place of spiritual balance, whatever that looks like for you. And so that was something. And I remember, I mean, really, this has been one of the focal sort of teachers for me. And I remember I was in the jungle once drinking with one of the Taitas that works with our teacher, and we were cooking medicine, and we had drank a little bit of medicine, and I got this urge that I needed to walk out of where we were cooking and go into the jungle a little bit. And I get out, and all of a sudden, just so much grief comes over me. I think this was maybe 4 years, 5 years after he had passed away. And I feel like this was the first time I like really had like a very, very deep cry around my brother. There had been littler ones. And so I go out, and there was a feeling that I wanted to make some sort of spiritual payment, some sort of offering to Mother Nature. And so I took off one of my necklaces. I had already brought a shovel with me. And so I dug a hole in the earth. I put a necklace in the ground and maybe something else. And it's the middle of the day. I remember just making my prayers and then lying on top of the hole. And it was really moving for me because it was like so hot and I was so dirty and I was sweating and I was just like, I just like surrendered myself completely, like however it looked, you know? And then what happened in that way of sort of surrendering to the grief and to those emotions, I saw that if we let grief be a teacher, it pointed back not just to my brother. And so it was first I was crying about my brother. Then I was crying about my dad's best friend who passed away, who was like a teacher to me. And then it pointed back to just existential grief. You know, just like grief of being born, you know, grief of feeling like I'm alone, you know, all of those sort of like heavy
The
karmic
human
wounds.
existence.
The human existence, exactly.
Uh-huh.
And so it's nice when you get those moments, because even if it's just for a moment of like space and breath, you're like, like there's a reason that these things happen. There's like a bigger healing. So that was really one of those nice breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's so beautiful, Eli. And, you just touched on so many threads, so many jewels. And, as you were sharing the experience with your mom, I had tears in my eyes and just really feeling the potent healing moment that came full circle when it was time, and you really just sharing your experience brings, to light this understanding that grief is a multi-layered experience. It's not a physical moment, but rather a teacher, like you said, that comes accompanying us in different points of our lives and in waves, And so it's not a definitive start and end, this process of grief. And I love how you brought it full circle to the payment and the offering that you did, because when we open, when we allow grief becomes a teacher to allow us into our own emotional body, to the waters of our feelings, and it becomes a portal, into the depths of being human and what it is to be alive. And I really feel that you have utilized that. I've seen you utilize it as a catalyst, and I think that's a true skill for all of us to cultivate within us, because grief is part of life, and pain and loss is part of life. And so if we can open ourselves wider to the force of life and allow the teacher that is grief to come and open us wider, then we emerge from these experiences like a phoenix, truly, reborn, stronger, more connected, fuller, more unified with the force of creation. And you really have done that. And so I want to thank you for sharing about this experience.
Thank you for your kind words.
So tell us a little bit about how the Yagé has helped you in your healing journey, and what your understanding is of the healing therapy of Yagé, and how it has supported you, as well as what you've seen, in your 10 years of studying, working with patients, and working alongside the Taitas. How does Yagé have support in cathartic healing experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's sort of been one of my biggest investigations. And, like I have different practices. I meditate, I do yoga, I work with plant medicines. And so I think part of what I like to do is trying to see the world and see what we're going through. And we have such a beautiful opportunity, both of us, and in our own ceremonies or when we're sitting with the Taitas in consultations, to see sort of the different ways that suffering arises for each of us. In the end, those sort of roots of suffering all come from the same place, which is, the forgetfulness of our oneness with the great creator. But in the end, suffering sort of manifests in its own unique ways. And so how can we, I think in the end, each one of us is responsible to find like what's the unique potion or concoction that we can put together in our lives to bring us back into love. And so I think there's a couple of threads that I've seen with Yagé. And then I think as well, everyone has their own sort of relationship to the medicine, and it helps them heal in their own way. One thing I really appreciate about the medicine is there's a capacity to break down the wall, let's say. Yeah. And I can say that for myself. When I drank medicine first when I was 17 years old, I took a few years of not drinking. And then about 11 years ago, I think I was around 20, I met Taita and I drank with him. And the first night again, I was like, this is interesting, but not really sure if this is for me. And the second night drinking with him, it was again one of those big moments of grace. It was like the walls around my understanding of reality, my understanding of who I am, came down. And of course, they've still been slowly coming down to this day. But it was like a big movement that happened. And I sometimes like to say and feel like it was maybe being able to look out the window and really take in the beauty of nature, being able to really like see the beauty of life, the beauty of being here, and to sort of have this impulse or like maybe a fire turned on within me of, okay, let's look at this now. Yeah, there's a way to free oneself of suffering. There's a way to be happy. And getting that fire turned on, there's nothing more important that can happen in life. That's, for me, like, that's it, And so just like if a person can help me to put one piece of wood on that fire, they're a miracle worker for me. That's what I think good friendship is. And so that's what I felt like with Taita. And maybe I hadn't even started building the fire. And so it started to get built there. And that was what opened me. And I think today, even more so than ever, we look back in time, people were living on the land, were farming, making clothing, hunting, doing different things that had such a different immediate connection with the earth. And as a result, our nervous systems were very different. And now, with pharmaceuticals, with technology, with just the general speed of society, of the movement, our nervous systems are becoming more and more agitated. And as a result, when you're not still physically and in the mind, it's difficult to see the stillness and peace that lives within you, because you can't even really drop into the present. And so the medicine, it goes through different layers of one's being and went through many layers of mine that night. And I think she had already been working on me from the previous ceremonies I had done. And it was able to sort of bring me to that window and see, look, here's something that's worth looking at. And from there, my path opened again in a new way. And so I think for me, that's one of the biggest gifts that the medicine has to offer us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on that similar note, and it's just sort of like another angle of this, and what I love about what you're doing here with the podcast and with Four Visions and people who are spreading light in this way is there's a way that community gets brought into this, and I think that's one of the big things we're missing on the planet today is community. And community was always a foundation of the indigenous society. And so what I feel in the ceremonies is there's sort of different levels of spiritual support that comes to you. So you have for example, in our tribe, we speak about the three different realms where you have the macaw, you have the tiger, you have the boa. And so these are like spirit guardians. But there you also have the lineage, the Engano lineage, the Siona lineage that's there with us. You also have the spirit guardians of the Taita who's serving you the medicine, and as well of your own spirit guides. And then in the physical, you have this community that comes to do ceremony who are all going into these really sensitive places of themselves. We're really exposing ourselves. And so in that space, there's already a feeling of sort of compassion and freedom there. And so as a result, we're able, and what I found so many times for myself, and it sometimes surprises me again and again, where it's like I open a door or I look through a window and I see something within myself that usually I've seen before. I know I need to embrace that part of myself more. Oh, I know that little child part of myself that was hurt when I was playing on the playground, as an example, needs some love. Mm-hmm. But somehow, I keep turning away from it. And so I feel like the grandmother, Yagé, and all of those Taitas, all the spirits there, they're like, we're with you. We got you. We're going back to the playground together. You can do this.
Yes. Yes. I love that. It's so true. It's so true. And it's so needed, to be going into the depths of our beings, to be taking off all of our shields of protection and placing ourselves at the feet of nature, the symbolically, right? And requires a tremendous amount of courage and the ignition of that fire, like you talked about. So we need all that support, and I think that that's
Yeah.
important to just recognize in life. We can't do it alone. And oftentimes when we fall into those lows of disconnection and suffering, it comes from this false illusion that we are trying to do it alone or we are alone, And so you just shared so many beautiful things. There's so many different directions we could go with this conversation. But one thing that's really present is utilizing our tools and really creating that network to uplift us on our path, as well as to sustain our spiritual fibers. And what does it mean to go strengthening our spiritual fibers and our spiritual strength, our fortitude? Because when you were talking a little bit at the beginning of how what you've witnessed with the Yagé is the way it helps us remember, and so much of our suffering is based on just simple forgetfulness. I think that it was so beautifully said. And we're such a forgetful species, we have these like mind blowing, spiritual, expansive experiences where we are fully connected to the force of life. And then 2 weeks later, we're in the deepest depression of the spirals of our own mind, right? In the prison that is our mind. We're really quite a silly species in that way, that we can't like remember what just happened and we can't carry it through. And we can. It just isn't our natural go-to, right? It's something that we have to condition. We have to
Yeah.
train ourselves to sustain that frequency. And I know we've talked a lot about it before because, a lot of your journey has been around training your mind. And you've shared with me in the past
Yeah.
how in times where you haven't been disciplined with your practice or just get a little off track, very quickly you've seen the way in which your mind just takes hold of the reins and takes you to la la land. And and it's very, very common, right? I'm sharing it because it happens to me, it happens probably to everyone
Yeah.
listening, and it's part of the human existence again. So, and one of the things that I've really witnessed with Yagé and with this path and with this lineage, because it's true about ayahuasca and plant medicine ceremonies in general, but then within this lineage is we've been blessed to have leaders that have very strong spiritual fibers that are very rooted in multi-thousand-year-old ancestral culture and have the force, like you said, of their ancestors and of their teachers and the spirits of the cosmovision of Yahé backing them. So that all comes to the altar when we go to work with this plant and work with the Taitas. And I've seen the way over the years that our spiritual fibers as brother and sister on this path have really strengthened. I've seen it because at the beginning we wavered a lot and we would fall into our old habits more and more. But then as time goes on, we've been able to hold the energy, hold that frequency more and more. And I think that's something that the Yahé has given us. Obviously, you might speak to your own personal practices as well as how you have worked on that. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about this process of strengthening our spiritual fibers and what it takes to do that and why it's so necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really resonated with what you said. And this isn't an exact quote, but I remember listening to Eckhart Tolle, and he was saying something about the mind. And it went something like this. In one moment, you could be, oh, my life is so good. I have everything. I'm so happy. I'm so abundant. I couldn't really ask for more. In the next moment, well, my life is so good. I'm so abundant. But it would be really nice if I had this one thing. If I just had this. And then the next moment, oh my God, because I don't have this thing, my life is no good. And then that can spiral and spiral until my life is a total disaster. And you can literally watch the mind go in 5 minutes to my life is so good to everything is wrong. And so, and it's 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 something that's really interesting because in the end, all of us go through that. And why we go through that is because the mind and the ego lives off of separation. It's like it's the nourishment for the ego. Yeah. It lives off of desire and like rejection and pushing that away. So it lives by thinking about the past or thinking about the future, wanting to push something away or wanting to pull something in. And so it's not like there's the fault of the mind or the ego. This is just the natural way that it is. And the mind has a very beautiful part to play in our lives, to think about things, to plan things, to, do a Zoom call, the two of us, we wouldn't be able to without that, right? And so now, in the same sense, we so little of the time, I think I was listening to someone say the other day, maybe 95% of the time, we're thinking about the past or we're worried about something from the future. Yeah. And so then what I've seen in my life when I come to the Yagé, if I come with that energy of worried about how the ceremonies or thinking about what I need to do tomorrow or, all of these doubts or insecurities or different things we generally carry with us, which is very normal, when I've been able to have a meditation practice, have a breathing practice, um, physical exercise, doing yoga, mantras, whatever are those practices that each one of us likes to do, then when we come into the ceremony, we come with a different level of stability. So, for example, one of the practices I'm doing right now is one of the most basic Tibetan Buddhist practice and also just a basic meditation practice throughout most traditions is shamatha practice, which is a concentration practice. People concentrate on the breath. You can concentrate like vipassana style on the sensations throughout your body, on a mantra, so many different things. Now, what happens there, which is so beautiful, is that through that concentration, the mind becomes more still and more still and more still. And so through that stillness, naturally we're able to be in the present moment more. Uh, and the amazing thing, a teacher was saying this, that, and I feel this in my own practice, is that the mind can be trained exponentially more than the body. So if you go to a gym and you start to work out, or you start to exercise, you're going to get stronger, your muscles are going to get bigger. But with the mind, the capacity of the mind and of consciousness is so beyond what we can even imagine. Because until you get there, it's just like, something so distant. And I've seen, for example, about a month ago, I was on a 2-week silent meditation retreat, and I was stunned at the possibility of peace. Like the real possibility of how I could be living and what is the nature of being. And so it's nice when you have those moments because you're like, wow, if I really practice, if I really meditate, if I really work with the plant medicines and diligently sit daily and find when do I need to go back to my practice, when am I off kilter, then the possibility of happiness, of freedom, of an end of suffering is real. And so I think when you put those practices and the medicine together, the benefits are enormous.
Beautifully said. And yeah, I think I think it's so true, and the way that you highlight the need for the spiritual practice outside of the ceremony, it's really important. I just want to touch on that too, because we often talk about these expansive experiences within the ceremony, and the beautiful visions and the counsel and the healing, and this is great, but one thing that we always come back to is the practice, is the daily practice of how we're showing up and how we're living the day to day. And this is one thing that working with the Taitas and the indigenous people of Putumayo have really taught me, because this community, this tribe is full of this gift of ultimate presence and value for this present moment and for the life that we're living. Taita talks often about living a life full of color. And for me, I had no idea what that even meant before I started working with him and with his lineage and culture. My life was so gray. It was black and white, and there was no concept of vibrancy and joy, true joy, what the only joy that comes when we're in the
Mm,
heart and we're in the present moment. And I feel like it's been one of the greatest gifts that could have ever come into my reality. And so I'm really, really grateful for the blessing to be able to live my life with color and to be able to share that with others. And so I know that that is something that you probably have experienced as well. I'm curious if you could share a little bit, if there's a specific teaching or experience that comes to mind, a memory that really impacted you of working either with Taito Juanito or one of his brothers, or with the tribes in Putumayo, something that has stayed with you and impacted your lens. Because I think that one thing of getting this gift of spending time with this indigenous family is we get to see things a different way, because people who live deep in the Amazon jungle, they just have a different perspective. It's just different, in really, really, really beautiful ways. And I would love to hear from you any things that comes to mind on that topic, because I think it's good to talk about things that open us to different perceptions and different ways of viewing life.
yeah. I think, I think one of the biggest things that I look at with the Taitas, and I don't know if there's like a particular teaching that comes through, but I think it's woven into a lot of what they're sharing with us, is the way of connecting with nature. Um, and what I see, and I can say with Taito Juanito, with Carlos, with Lucho, that they all, to me, and I love each of one of them so much, and I think they're each so unique, in their flavors. And sometimes when I've looked at them, I'll feel their sort of embodiment of nature in a different way. And I remember thinking once about Taita Juanito, and we both know on a personal level how much beautiful work he's doing in the world and how much he's supporting people. And in moments where something difficult comes his way, which does for everyone, even Taitas, to see how he's able to move
Mhm.
through that. Uh, and I often feel like they're like these
Mhm.
rivers. Oh my God, there's a huge boulder
Yeah.
there. Like, let's find another way
Oh my
around.
God. So
you
true.
know, and
No, this is life changing.
and
This is
I
life
think,
changing, Eli, because literally my conditioning before I met them was, oh my God, there's a drama, there's an emergency, code red, code red, code red. And then to watch how they navigate challenges, life changing, life changing. So go on.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I think as well for us in ceremony
Mhm.
itself, like I remember when I started with Taita, something strong would happen in the ceremony. I'd be like, oh my
Yeah.
God, panic. And now there's like, and I remember Taita Lucho saying this to me. He said that you need to be clear about how you move in a ceremony. You need to be like a tiger, you know, like a tiger is not going to be like, oh my God, there's something I want to eat. Like, let me run out of the bush yelling so it hears me, right? It's like, okay, there's a situation happening over there. Let me see how I move through the space in a good way. You know, very, very attentive to each one of my steps. And then when it's the moment of action, there's a clear action that happens. And so I see for myself, and I remember talking with one of our medicine brothers, Michael, about this. We were saying that, like, in a ceremony, it's like that night is like an entire lifetime. Yeah. And so you have there's a feeling of a spiritual death that comes up for oneself, you know, which is like an old karma or an emotion or a way of thinking that's being released. You know, maybe there's grief that comes up. Maybe there's joy that comes up. And so we all go through sort of this vast array of emotions, of peace, of serenity. And I really resonated with what you said of this sort of color that comes with the dancing, with the singing, with the prayer. And so I think for me, it's been so beautiful to have been given the opportunity to be in service in ceremonies, and as well to have gone through so many difficult processes myself in ceremonies, because it gives a certain amount of spiritual fortitude to then move through life. You know, okay, the flat tire came, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, you know, it's a bummer, but it could be worse.
And to not get thrown off kilter, you know, and to be able to breathe in that moment and not have an anxiety attack or panic attack or just start going into the worst possible scenarios, you know, that's serious, because honestly, most of us are not given that training. And so I'm so happy you brought this topic up, because it's truly affected my life and everyone who studies with the Taitas, I think. So I'm so happy you touched on it, because just like you said, how the Taitas embody nature. Nature doesn't go into a panic attack when, you know, the rocks move or a landslide happens. You know, nature allows. Nature is in grace with what is to come. And so how can we live more from that place and understand that shit happens? That's life, you know, that's part of life. And so how do we move through the challenging experiences on the wings of love and with connection to life itself, knowing that we are held in the process, knowing that we will come out the other end? Because I think often when we are in a challenging situation, it's really hard to realize that our life will resolve, that this situation will pass, you know, because we get so caught up into whatever emergency, and it shakes us to our core.
That happens
It
to you
does,
also?
yeah. It's a common thing. Yeah, it's quite common. And so to be able to, in those moments of emergency or of urgency, have that, hold our center, it's a tremendous skill to hone in. And I'm not saying that I have honed in on it 100%, because again, it's a practice and a tool. But you know, as you mentioned, it's being emulated to us and it's being demonstrated, and that is a tremendous gift and blessing.
Yeah. Yeah, just to add one thing to that, I think it's so beautiful what's coming through this sharing. I think it's also so important because in spiritual communities, I think one big thing that can happen is spiritual bypassing. And so with what we're saying, I remember a teacher was sharing that, and I've seen this happen for me quite often in my life, where it's like, I feel like I'm evolving and I'm growing, and, you know, the chance and the connection with the medicine, and then all of a sudden it's like boom. It's like down to the bottom. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened there? Like, did I completely take a wrong turn at some point? Or is this just like what needed to happen? And I've seen that happen again and again. And so through those sort of big drops, or, whatever size the drop was, I've started to see, and the teacher was explaining, it's like we have more light coming to our being. The more we're working with the medicine, the more we're meditating, the more we're being in good company, spending time in nature, whatever are those things. And so then what happens is our flashlight becomes brighter. And so as a result, we're able to visit places in our house or places in our being that we haven't been able to visit before. And so I think it's so important that, great, if you can maintain that place of compassion, that place of love when you get a flat tire, wonderful. But if you don't be like, I've been drinking so much medicine, I've been meditating so much, and then you end up getting hard on yourself, which is like, it's very sneaky, the ego, because it's like the ego is saying, oh, you should be doing better because you're more spiritual. And in a way that sounds good, but actually what's happening there is you're going against yourself because you didn't do something in the way that you believe you should be doing now, which is generally actually the problem, right? It's that inner critic voice that's criticizing our movements. And so I think the more we can as well just say, okay, this is another win that's coming through, and maybe this time I didn't walk in the most precise way that I could have, but I'm a human being. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm doing, my practices. Let me hold myself. Then I feel like that is where we really sort of, I think they say like grist for the mill, really start to transform those deeper wounds.
I love that. It's so beautiful. And, you know, we either do that, we criticize, or we project onto other people and or other
Oh
like
yeah.
circumstances, right? So the human mind is so funny and predictable. And we've also witnessed a lot of that in our journey together of looking outside of ourselves or finding something to point the finger out to avoid doing our own work, right? And for those listening, just to give a little bit of context, our community is there's hundreds of people in our community that work with the Taitas all over the world, but there's about 40 people who consider themselves disciples or students of Taita who are working in a more intimate way. And so you can imagine 40 people studying, drinking medicine, spending a lot of time together. Just like in any community, we have our challenges. There are moments where our egos clash or there's miscommunications, and that's something that's been really beautiful because we've all been able to grow tremendously and learn how to live in community, which like you mentioned, Eli, it's not really something that many of us grow up having that access point to because we're so isolated as a society. So a lot of us, I would say, in this family are learning these skills for the first time. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what you have learned about this tendency to point the finger or not take full responsibility, and the way in which it has hindered or delayed your own studies, and what insights you've received through these processes and how it's helped you to come home to yourself and to really focus on yourself, which we've been told many times over and over again. Focus on yourself. Like, what does that mean? Focus on yourself. Just focus on yourself. No one else matters. Just focus on yourself. Why? Why is that?
I think I think there's something very beautiful there, and it's something I've sort of investigated a lot before and looked at, like, what creates a good relationship, what creates a good community, a good bond with another person. And I think in the end, what I've seen, and I'm still every day learning more and more, is what is sort of the foundation. Yeah, like what's the deeper friendship? What's holding the relationship, the sort of glue? And I feel that with you, and I can say with the community, it's so nice with the medicine because I remember outside here at Blue Spirit, I was going through a full process one night, and you were there holding me through that. And I was on your knees, and I was going through like everything, all of my emotions, all of the stories, all of the fears was there, and you were in that moment there to support me. And so I think there's moments like that, especially when we're brought to such a tender, open place, so vulnerable, that then when we are able to have a friend or a teacher that holds us, there's a sort of base of kindness, of human compassion that comes through. And so I think that is one of the keys, because in the end, I, you know, projecting on other people, projecting on my partner, projecting on my parents, projecting on friends, that's something that happens a lot in life, and when you have a good community around you, there's a way that um, is held, and it doesn't rub the edges as much. There's not as much friction, of course, it happens. And so I think really in the end, what helped me the most with that is probably meditation. Because meditation with the medicine has been a way for me to be able to step back and to see what is my true nature, what is the essence of my being. Uh, and then when you understand that the essence of your being and you feel it and really recognize that is the essence of all beings, then there may be a projection onto you or a projection onto another person from you, but there's not the same sort of grab. Because in the end, in a bigger way, nothing's
Mm-hmm.
personal.
Mm-hmm.
In a material way, of course, there is human dynamics and relationships, and you have to be appropriate if you want to be happy in the way that you live. But the more we start to understand who we are, the more we can sort of let go of those projections. And I feel that with certain relationships that I have, that when a person has that recognition, there's less sort of stickiness, less grab. And so I might say something to someone and it turns into a whole blow up. Or I might say it to another person the same way in the same instance, but it kind of moves through. Yeah. Or even more important, not what's happening to them, but what's
Mm-hmm.
happening to me. Yeah. And I feel like our teachers are also showing that to us, in the same way they're moving like a river. We have to be there in ceremony, be there with the people so that that information comes through, but it's not something that then either we take on or we worry about ourselves. It's like, okay, we open, seeing that this is some energy of suffering that's manifesting right now. How can I bring that upwards, bring that downwards into the earth, into the heavens, and have the spirits and ancestors there to help transform that if that is meant to be transformed in
Mm-hmm.
that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing that our teachers have always modeled to us is how can we take whatever's arising and utilize it as a vehicle for our transformation and our studies. And so I know that Taito Juanito, he's saying that he's always studying. He's studying life. He's studying the nature of people, the human psyche. And so as we go learning from situations, from interactions, we go adding this information to our understanding of humanity and our understanding of life. And that's really the path of the healer too, is healing ourselves and then understanding the nature of the mind and understanding the nature of humanity to be able to be in service in that way to others. So, on that note, I would love to ask you, my brother, to share a little bit about how your initiative, The Nature Within, came to being, and also your decision to start supporting the Taitas to bring their lineage and their culture out of the jungle and into the West. When they made that decision, you played a very crucial role in starting to help them to share their culture. And I know that was part of how The Nature Within came to being. So, would you share with us a little bit more about your company, your business, and what you guys offer, as well as how it's been influenced with the path and the form that your work has taken over the last decade?
Yeah. So I think there were sort of many seeds that were planted along the way, but one of the main seeds that came was when I had that night with Juanito that I explained the walls were broken down. In that night, I had a lot of visions. And one of the visions was of working with Taita, of being one of his disciples, of leading retreats with him, and the whole thing. And of course, I was like, maybe he just, maybe I just like how he looks, and it seems like he's doing something good, and I just want to be like him. So I wasn't really sure. In the morning, I go to him and I say, I didn't know him all. I think it was the second or maybe the third or fourth ceremony that I'd been with him, and said, I would love to study with you. I'd love to help you. I want to lead retreats with you. My dad has Blue Spirit Retreat Center. It's just 20 minutes down the road. We could do this here. And he said to me, from what I remember in Spanish with a translator, I didn't speak that much Spanish in that time. He said something like, let's see how our karmic destiny unfolds.
Very open-ended.
And I was like, all right. I was like, all right, that's the Indian way
Yeah,
of blowing
right.
me off. All right, I get it. So I kept following him around, and I went to ceremonies with him. And long story short, I ended up staying with him in Colombia. He invited me in the early days when he had very few disciples from the West. And we started studying together. He slowly started teaching me very, very slowly. And then it started to unfold. I think for me, I always look back and see that he was like he knew where I was. And so in a moment when I was kind of like, I don't actually want to do this like I thought I did, but I like hanging out with you and your family. But once I let go of the idea of wanting to be a shaman and have feathers and all of that, then he was like, okay, maybe there is a space in there for something to grow. And so that's when the path started opening. And so I started helping him in Colombia, and I was fortunate that in that time, again, there weren't so many people around him, so I kind of started to translate and to help assist with the community and the retreats and whatever I could do. And then at a certain moment, he had already been coming to Costa Rica, but I suggested for him to do a retreat with me at Blue Spirit here in Nosara in Costa Rica. And we had been leading retreats for a few years already at his retreat center in Colombia, Finca Ambiwasi, but this was the first retreat he had led outside of Costa Rica. And we had been doing ceremonies, but it was just weekend ceremonies, just 2 nights, Friday and Saturday. And so then we had this space of a week to implement preparation activities to ceremonies on the Monday and Tuesday, and then integration activities afterwards. And it was really nice because Taita had his background, from his indigenous tribes and his study with the medicine of being a botanist and all that he carried. And then I also had my understanding of meditation, of going to India, of yoga and everything I did. And so we sort of had a moment of trying to bridge these two and see what would work the best in a week-long retreat. And that, over the past 5, maybe 6 years now, has been transforming more and more to become more focused in exactly what we feel is the best for a week-long retreat with Yagé. So we have some yoga classes, we teach meditation, we have breath work during the week. From Taitas study, we've brought into the retreats the technology of the sweet steam showers and the bitter steam showers, which is, I know in your community this is talked a lot about as well, which is the technology of bringing the wisdom, the consciousness of the plants onto the body for detoxification and for bringing sweetness in. We also have private consultations with Taita before the ceremonies to check in with you, to go through your medical history, to find your intention. Before and after the ceremonies, there's a ancestral wisdom talk with Taita, and I think we both know how amazing he is in the amount of time he gives to make sure everyone's questions are answered, if there's any doubts. And so there's always space with him for that. And as well, recently we've been having other guest teachers come. Pia Lucy has been coming and sharing voice workshops and sharing music. We often have musicians coming with Taita himself. And I'm particularly excited that Mariah is going to be joining us in April. Maybe in a moment she can share a little bit more about what she would be offering there. Then on the Monday and Tuesday, we have the Yagé ceremonies, which is sort of the pinnacle of the week. And those ceremonies go through the night. There's always a really experienced team. There's many people that have been studying with Taita for a long time who come and support. And on top of that, Blue Spirit is just amazing. I think it's one of the nicest retreat centers on the planet. It's right on the Pacific Ocean. There's delicious food. This last retreat, we also did a sweat lodge. And so we're always weaving in new activities. We always leave 3 days after the ceremonies for integration. And I think just being in Costa Rica is a huge healing in itself. We always like to leave space for just walking around and swimming. Just a country on the planet that's a real refuge for goodness and taking care of the earth. So all of that weaves into our Nature Within retreats. And yeah, so our website is thenaturewithinus.com. And our Instagram is _nature_within. And we'd love to have any of you who are coming, any of you who are listening to come. And yeah, just it's a big blessing to come and drink the medicine, whether it's here or whether it's with Taita at his place in Fincambawasi. But I always really recommend, and I think it's so nice to have this podcast, if you haven't met us before, to be able to feel our energy and to see if this is something you align with. Because the beautiful thing is, on one side, the medicine is coming out into the world and it's needed. And I think it's one of the things that could really save the planet. But on the other side, there's a lot of people that don't serve the medicine in a good way or don't have a proper lineage behind them. And so always when going to drink, when working with these sacred plants, make sure it's in a community that you feel really good with.
Thank you for adding that last part, Eli. It's so important. And yeah, I really just want to affirm everything that Eli just shared about his retreats at Blue Spirit. And I've watched him grow these events over the last 5, 6 years, and he really has created an incredible program with an absolutely fabulous team, obviously all trained by Taita Juanito and his brothers. And one thing about the Yagé in the lineage that we study with is the students are very highly trained. So you're working not only with the Taitas, who are masterful shamans and master healers. But many of the students have 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10, 11 years of experience on the path. And the team at Blue Spirit is some of my favorite people to work with. And the location is just incredible. Like Eli said, there's a lot of healing just in being in Costa Rica, but specifically the center, you get fed so well, and the land and the space, the container that holds you during the week-long retreat is just so luxurious and beautiful and nourishing and comfortable. And I'm very excited to be coming back to Blue Spirit. It's been a minute, I think, since before my son was born, or very almost 2 years, I think, since I've been there. And I'm looking forward to being together again with the team and coming together for this beautiful retreat coming up in April 8th through the 15th. Eli mentioned Pia will be there, Taita Juanito, myself, and Eli will be leading it together. And then we have incredible assistants and a wonderful family to welcome you and receive you down there. So definitely check out the links in our show notes if you want to learn more about the nature within and the retreats that are happening there in Costa Rica. I think are there 5 in 2023 or 4? How many do you have?
There's
There's
3.
3 planned for 2023. Cool. So
Yeah.
definitely, if you can come in April, we would love to have you there. And, what Eli was saying, just about feeling, the intention and the integrity and the energy behind who you choose to work with. It's definitely one of our most important values with Four Visions. We really do our very best to give you the opportunities that are of the highest caliber and the highest integrity. And that's whether it's with our products that we're sourcing or with the offerings and the events that we put in front of you. Our entire team would never offer something or put something in front of our community if we didn't validate it and know the integrity and the caliber of and the quality of the offering 100%. And that's something that we can really stand behind and affirm with my brother Eli and with Blue Spirit and with Taita Juanito, of course, our beloved teacher who has been very present in this conversation. And, I'm trying to figure out how to get Taita on a podcast, everyone listening, just so you know, because he's an incredible man and just has so much wisdom to share. The language barrier is something I'm working out, but maybe we can get him in for season 2. I'll keep you posted. But it's really nice to get to, be here and feel him so very present, and to just the love that we both have for him. It brings him forth even more. And so, I really hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation. I have. Eli, you're amazing. I love you so much. Thank you so much for creating this space and saying yes to come on and to have this beautiful conversation. It's been a real pleasure and a treat, and makes me so excited to be together in a few months.
Love you so much, dear. I feel like we were needing to have a conversation too, so I'm so happy.
Yeah, we got our catch up done.
We got our catch up.
Yeah.
I missed you, and I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And so I just want to really congratulate you on that, and many blessings for this podcast and people that are listening to share this with others, and for Four Visions, and really looking forward to working with you soon.
Thank you, and God bless you all.
God bless you.
From everyone at the Four Visions Market family, we would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. We really hope that you've enjoyed the conversation and gained many new insights on plant medicines, ancestral wisdom, and much more. Please remember to visit our website at www.fourvisionsmarket.com for more resources and information on plant medicine and spiritual tools. And please don't forget to follow us across social media for regular updates on upcoming episodes. We are grateful for your support and look forward to continuing this path with you all. Until next time, take care, stay present, and stay connected.